Well, I'm very pleased today to be speaking with Nancy King Schofield. Thank you for joining us, Nancy. And
Inviting me.
a little bit, this project is part of our revelations from the collection. So we started the project at the very beginning of COVID, and here we are almost a year in. And for International Women's Day, we are releasing a number of these interviews with some of the prominent women in our collection. So I'm very happy to say that you're one of those women.
And I'm honored that you consider me to be one of those women. Thank you.
So with COVID, I'm asking everybody this question. What revelation has occurred to you? What is the thing that stands out to you the most as an artist particularly?
Well, as far as an overall view, I found that it was difficult in that I couldn't see my women friends because we all kind of help each other. I have two writers groups, and one is just women, and there are women in the mixed group, and we're in touch. We have our own little circle, and we all kind of help each other.
Mhm.
So that was the first thing, but we could still talk and we could Zoom, so that wasn't too bad. Then the hard part was not seeing my family, because my son is scared to come. He's afraid he'll give it to me, and I'm not 30 anymore. And my daughter's in Halifax, and she was afraid of bringing something to Moncton, and she has, it's still girls that come to her house and so on when they can. And it was just complicated. And I found the time seemed to go very fast. Did you find that? I mean, it seemed like it was Monday and then it was Friday.
Mhm.
And so in between, I was trying to stay focused and write and write. And if I couldn't do that, I would then go back to my visual. So I felt very privileged that I had those two things, because I thought about people that hadn't developed that kind of practice. And it must have been hard to watch TV a lot and listen to the radio a lot, So I didn't want to sympathize about myself too much, because I felt I was quite lucky in that sense.
Well, that's great. That's good. So as part of International Women's Day, I'm asking also the question, has there been a particular woman that has been very influential in your life?
Yes, I have to say that it was my mother, because she was a very disciplined person, and she was a natural pianist. She never had lessons, but she could play anything, all by ear. And her family, all of her siblings were the same. They could pick up an instrument and just play it. It was a gift that they had. And so she was always playing piano in the home, and she encouraged my singing, because she said she saw something in me that wasn't normal, average. She felt that I needed to have training and direction, because she thought I had a gift. And I was singing when I was 3. So by the time I was 5, I was performing in major musicals in St. John, semi-classical musical presentations. And, we would have a cast of maybe 70 or 80 people. And I was 5. So I would sit in the photos and my feet weren't even touching the floor, and I really didn't really know what was going on then. I was just doing what I was trained to do. So only thing I really stands out in my mind is seeing a black in front of me with lights in my eyes. And occasionally I might see the top of someone's head, but that's all. I just went out and sang. I didn't even know why I was doing it. So my mother was the one who took care of that and pushed me along, not pushed me in the sense that made me, put pressure on me, but she encouraged. So she was a very strong woman and a very strong figure in my life.
And how do you think having that experience, I guess, and being a woman, how do you think that has sustained you in your artistic career?
Well, because when I was a teenager, I had a job. I worked 3 evenings a week and on Saturdays, just to have my own spending money, because I didn't want to take that from my parents. You know, you have your studies. I had piano and vocal lessons every week and sometimes performances. So I really had no time to spend with my friends. And they didn't like me for that, you know. So I had to be strong enough to accept it and say, okay, this is the way it is, and this is more important. And then the other thing was I sang with an orchestra, which wasn't in the books. My singing teacher wasn't happy about that, but I wanted that experience to see what that was like. And I learned a lot because very often the conventions were mostly men, male, and they would make sure I heard their remarks.
Hmm.
You know, whether it was about my voice, or if they were polite, or if they weren't as polite and maybe were a little tipsy, I'd hear some sexual comments. So I had to be able to rise above that
Hmm.
and just sing and do what I was trained to do and walk off with dignity and not let it bother me.
Mhm.
So those things strengthened me. And nursing was a male dominated arena when I was 18.
Hmm.
And we were trained from the beginning. If we wanted an elevator and it arrived and there were a lot of males on it or male doctors wanting to get on, we waited for the next elevator. We let them get on first. So all those things were pushed into me, you know, early on. And I wasn't happy about it, but I couldn't say anything.
Mhm.
So it made me quite strong, I thought. And family, of course, raising children. You have to rise above all kinds of things and continue in a very sane way. So even when you felt you were going insane. So I think all those things strengthen women. I do. Yeah.
Right. So, you're speaking about your musical career. You're a writer, but you're also a visual artist. When did you first become attuned to the fact that you were a visual artist as well, or a visual person? What was your earliest recollection of that?
Well, you know, when I was growing up singing in that music area, I always got things for art every year at Christmas. And so I was always dabbling in art, but not in a serious way, you know, just for my own pleasure. And then when I went into nurses training, I remember the nuns used to ask me to do the windows at Christmas, which I never could understand why, but I did them. And I just did them. I didn't hear anything about them, but it seemed to be normal. Later on in my life, I'd say when I was around maybe in my 40s, I started feeling quite badly about leaving my music because we had moved a lot with my husband, he was always looking for a challenge in his job. So, and he was in management, so we would move. We made altogether, I suppose, in my life, 31 moves.
Wow.
And so I couldn't really jump back into my voice situation. But I thought about it and I felt guilty about leaving it. So I finally thought I came around to the painting thing and I took a course in Moncton and I was caught. I was there. I had to do it. So that's when I thought about going to university because, you know, I was always already 46 and the years go by fast and I might spend the next 10, 15 years trying to learn that process. So I thought 4 or 5 years at university, whatever, would be well worthwhile. And that's why I decided. And then after I had that degree and I had such good training at Mount Allison, it really helped me to move ahead fast in that area.
Mhm.
And and that's where I was. And I didn't then feel bad about the music. I could still listen to it and I still have all my records from when I was young. But, you know, I had something that I could continue with at that age and so on.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's how that happened, really. And that, you know, was a positive, very positive factor in my life.
Uh-huh. So, what drives you to create, whether it's your written work, your singing, your visual art? What is the thing underneath that all that just
That really makes me want to do it.
hmm,
Well, I think that I have things that are very important in my life that keep me inspired and what make me want to do the art. And like, for example, I would think first of nature. I'm very drawn to nature and grew up along the Kennebecasis River for years. And I've been here in Grand Barachois next to the ocean. I'm 5 minutes from the ocean for the last 23 years. Music, once again, is very inspirational for me. There are different things that trigger that thing in me, but the need to do art has never been a problem for me because my process is very ritualistic
Hmm.
and it has form. It's like a sculpture. So I start, and there are, about 7 or 8 steps that I do with every piece. Starts with an idea, and then I do research. And I can get that idea from anything. It can be just something that interests me in any of those other areas, in nature, ancient civilizations, whatever. And geology has always been big. So I do my sketches, my loose sketches of what I'm thinking I might do. And I like to work large. So always have. It doesn't intimidate me. And I seem to be able to translate my ideas fairly well to large pieces. A small piece for me is nothing under 2 feet by 2 feet. I consider that small.
Hmm.
Medium, 4 feet by 4 feet. So large, my first major piece I did was 8 feet high by 20 feet wide. So after you've done a piece like that, the scale changes. You want to work large because I think there's a lot of power in larger pieces too if they're well handled.
Mhm, mhm.
So all those things are what really make me want to create. I just don't have a problem with being drawn to creation.
So let's talk a little bit about the piece that we're featuring today.
Yes.
It's called Natura 6.
Hmm.
Talk a little bit about I see in the image behind you, you have sort of a grid kind of
Yes.
work there
Yes.
as well. Talk to me about the use of the grid. Talk to me a little bit about the textures, the materials, how you've approached this piece particularly.
Okay. Well, I didn't give it a title until after it was finished because, you start off and you don't really know for sure where the piece is going. But about 10 years ago, I wanted to do a really large piece about trees. And that's the one I just mentioned to you. And it turned out the way that the energy went, it was really 5 panels of text, big panels, 4 feet wide, 8 feet high. And it was all text about trees because I wrote, this big long story that I recorded and actually was played with the piece. And I put a little tiny lighted image in the very center of it. And it was about a rainforest. And the statement I was trying to make was that, all these wonderful forests, and especially particularly rainforests, were starting to be cut down. And that was a concern. So that was sort of the impetus to do that piece. With Natura 6, I started off thinking I was going to do 6 panels of branches. And after I had done 3 and was starting to put them on the floor and go up in my loft and look at them, I thought, no, I don't think I want to go that way after all, because the energy was moving now towards photo as a contrast of materials. So I decided to go into photo, and I gave a consignment to a photographer, a friend of mine who's also a visual artist. And he said, oh, I'll take some photos for you with of sand and water, which I was thinking the softness, something soft to contrast with the sturdy tree branches, which I worked long and hard at in bas relief to try to make them stand out and be strong like they are, have a real presence. So he came with the photos, and I added those into the mix. And I still had another panel, and I didn't think I wanted a third one. I thought it might be too static. So I decided on rocks. So the poor guy had to go out again and look for nice water washed rocks or water washed rocks for me, because I've always had a big attraction to them, you know, which is very Irish, rocks and horses. It's very Irish. And I put the rocks in there, and boy, you know, it was like strong and still static. So I thought I needed an actor, you know, I needed some action. And I thought of horses because of my background. My grandfather raced horses. He had horses. I was at the horse barns with my father almost every Sunday. The smell, the whole thing. So it's very strong in my psyche. And I thought, yes, I'm going to. So I then decided on a copper horse, because I thought that would just nail everything down. And when I did, it worked. And I was content with the piece as it was. Since that time, and since I've had time to look at it, I'm still happy with the work. But now I see a story,
Hmm.
which is also Irish, you know. And half the time when I'm doing these big pieces, I don't see it at the time, but later it starts to come to the surface. And so, you know, I see this copper colored horse running through the forests and skirting the edges of the rivers or the ocean, but free. You know, I don't know if he's running from something or running to something, but it all makes sense now. In which at the time it was mostly just aesthetic sense.
Mhm, mhm.
So it does take time for these pieces that are bigger and maybe more abstract than some other things. You know, in the presentation, it takes time for the story to come through, and sometimes it doesn't even come through in my head until later.
Right. Well, I know some of the earlier pieces that I've seen of yours, or and indeed in our collection, they're bas relief. They're not just a square panel. They're cut out. There's routed um,
Yes,
sections. You know, it's very textured.
yeah,
Very, you know, it's outside of the frame.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so, are you continuing to work that way, or are you kind of working in these grids now, or what's your work like now? What are you working on? What kind of ideas are you
I'm
exploring?
continuing to work. My plan is to continue to work the way I have in the past. I feel that, you know, I've that thread has run through my work since I started really producing, which would have been in let's see, 1991. And I'm working on a show right now that I'm looking at the Mayan civilization, just because I wanted a change, you know. So I like to move from one area to the other, and these are probably the smaller pieces are all going to be around 2 by 2, but I will probably go into a 4 by 4 foot piece, and I might even go into another grid, you know, because I like to spread all that information that I've garnered in the smaller pieces, and I like to make a big statement. So I feel that I will go there. That's going to be the future, you know, over the next several months before we have a show again. And I don't know where that. I often have a show. I collaborate with another artist that you know, but not being able to work right now. He's in hospital, and I may have to go it in a different way. You know, so time will tell. Time solves everything for us, doesn't it?
Mhm. Well, it certainly shows us a pathway, that's for sure. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Um, so you're also a writer, and you have recently worked on a few publications. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, I wanted to get into writing, and then a friend of mine who's an artist said, "What do you write?" And this was about 22 or 3 years ago, and I said, "I don't have time to write." And they said, "That's no excuse." They said, "You have to write. It's part of the process." I said, "It is?" "Yes." They said, "You have to write." So I started writing, and I started in poetry. And I know that one of my relatives, distant but nevertheless, was a published poet in St. John, and she used to write regularly for different magazines, articles, and poetry and so on. But I had never really thought of it seriously until that time. And then I really went to work on it, and it was terrible in the beginning. It was not good at all. It was bad. But I kept plugging and plugging. And I thought, it's great to have an audience to read to if you've written. And there wasn't anyone for me to do that. Only one person who was already a very successful writer. And I don't think he enjoyed what I was reading to him. So I stopped that and I went searching for a woman. And I found one in a good friend of mine, Nancy Moran in Moncton, who is a visual artist and has since left and pursuing another career. But she was great. We started reading to one another. And then I thought, well, it would be nice if we had a group. So I started a group. And we decided to call ourselves the Breach House Gang. And we're still working together, all different people now, pretty well, except for a couple, but all new writers. And then about 4 years ago, I decided to start an all women's group. So I have WWW now, which is Women Who Write as well. And we're mostly all published, and the dynamic, the energy of that group is just wonderful. I just love it. It's just great. We have 11 members, and just a new one coming on. And I still have the Breach House Gang, which is mixed. So we did 4 anthologies. We published 4 anthologies. Our Breach House Gang. We haven't got to publishing yet in the women's group, but they're all busy women. They're all busy women, involved with Northrop Frye and all various situations that keep them writing. They're doing editing. So, the writing has reached a little different level now. And the people that I have in the group have evolved. And then we have a whole lot of new writers who are very serious. So it's wonderful, because the text feeds the art, and the visual art feeds the text. Mm-hmm. So it's a perfect marriage, it really is.
Yeah. And I mean, you've incorporated words in your work for a very long time, so that has been
yes. And I've just created an alphabet, and it's hieroglyphic. It's called Mayaglyph because it's along the lines of the Mayan alphabet, mm-hmm. but each letter and each number is a character. And so I have got that done, and I'm going to be using that on the surface of several of the pieces for the next show. So that was great fun to do that. I love that.
Well, that's exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yes, I hope you do. Because I think I had my first show at your gallery.
I think you did. That was quite
after I graduated. Yeah, that was a long time ago, and it was lovely. And I'll never forget. I had that lovely little brochure made and everything. I was so excited. It was just a wonderful start for me.
Yeah, it was. I remember that show very well as well.
Yes.
As a woman, what do you think you're most proud of accomplishing over the course of your career, your lifetime?
Well, when I look back at everything, and I've had a very happy life, and I feel that I'm very privileged that I had the kind of parents that I had, and so on. But I had to strike a balance between family and my artistic process. Mm-hmm. And I knew it was going to be hard because for the first several years, it was a battle, really, especially when the children were younger. And I would get up each morning and say, now, Nancy, you're going to save 1 hour today for your art. That is the very least you can do. And I would say maybe 2 or 3 days out of the week that would happen, that I'd get an hour, because so I started working in the evenings after everyone was asleep. And that was like a whole revelation for me because no one came and asked me for anything. I didn't have to get meals. I didn't have to do anything in the housework area. So even the dog went to sleep. So I started working in the evenings. And now I have some really bad habits for general living, but they're wonderful for art. So I never go to bed before 2 in the morning, 2:30. That's when I get my energy. It starts around 9 and goes till 2 or 3. That's when I want to work. So it was a bad habit, but it's great.
I share that habit, I'm afraid.
You, I bet you do, yes, because you also have your day pretty well controlled.
Yeah.
That's
In,
good.
in terms of female artists, who would you say is there's a if there is a pivotal female artist that you have looked up to that has been an inspiration to you throughout your career?
Well, there are so many
Mm,
wonderful women artists. The first artist that I was drawn to was George O'Keeffe, and I was so keen. I did her whole story, and I wanted to know everything about her and all her paintings and her drawings and so on. But over the years, there have been many artists that I have been drawn to, and not just women artists. I've also I'm a big follower of Anson Kiefer. I love his work, and other male artists too that I keep an eye on. But there are so many women artists now online that you can follow, and you don't have to be able to go see their work, and they are amazing. There are many amazing women. My daughter is into study again at the tender age of the 50s, in her 50s, and she's gone back to university, and she finds these wonderful artists all the time, and she's always sending them to me. So I'm getting little glimpses, like a little quick video shots of all these women, and it's wonderful because it always inspires, when we see other people who have accomplished
mhm.
things in their work. It's very inspirational. So I think I have like a potpourri of artists that I like to look at. So no one in particular, because there's so many.
Nancy, can you tell me how Natura 6 fits into your oeuvre as a whole? Is there a sense of that? Is there a path that you can discern at this stage?
As far as materials go,
Hmm.
yes, yes. Well, texture is very important. It's very important. That's why I don't work much on. I've hardly ever worked on canvas. I did in the very beginning of my practice, but I soon left it. When I was at Maltais, I left it, and I went to wood.
Mhm.
And I mostly work on wood panels now because of the texture and what I can do with them. I can deconstruct, or I can construct. I can integrate objects. I can cut them into ribbons if I want. It just gives me so much scope.
Mhm.
And I really do want to have texture in my work. It's until I get some on the surface, on the substrate of the piece that I'm working on, I don't feel I'm really cooking. That's how important it is.
Yeah.
Color is a more difficult area for me. It takes me a long time to decide about color. I think that in a perfect world, I wouldn't even color my pieces. I
Hmm.
just leave them wood with materials and objects, and that would suffice for me.
Uh-huh.
I didn't use red for about the first 7 or 8 years of my practice because it made me so nervous when I put it on the piece that I always go back and cover it with black.
Hmm.
It was the energy, because so much of my work is about energy.
Mhm.
And I want to make a landscape. With every piece I do, I think landscape, and I want to make a landscape that will hold a story. But I don't always see the story by the time I get to the end of the piece. And that's why I was saying about Natura 6 that it took me quite some time for that story to really come up.
Mhm.
But I think I have the sense of when the landscape has the story,
Mhm.
if that makes any sense at all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I am out of questions and we're almost out of time. I'm wondering if there's anything else you'd like to say before we sign off. If there's anything you want us to know about something coming up or
You know,
ideas you're working with right now.
I think, Marie, we've covered everything. The only thing I can say for the future is that, I plan to stay with the art process, and wherever that goes, that's where I'll be.
Well, that's wonderful. I look forward to following up on your future work, and I'm interested in your Maya series. That sounds very fascinating.
Thank you. It was a good interview. You had good questions.
Thank you, Nancy. Wonderful to talk to you, and enjoy this beautiful sunny day.
Yes, you too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.